Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, welcome to the end of month Q&A video for July 2021. I've got a good number of your questions on the screen in front of me here, so let's get cracking. And first up this month is Yusuf Kasim, who says, I had a question regarding ohms and speakers. How do you know whether to put 16 ohms or 8 ohms in a 1x12 or 2x12? Right, now there's a video coming, it might not be in August, it might be in September, but coming soon, about wiring speakers in a 2x12 cabinet, and I talk a lot more about this concept in that video. But essentially, if your amplifier has both 8 and 16 ohm taps, or you can switch between the two impedances, in a 1x12 cab or combo, it doesn't really matter which impedance of speaker you're running, as long as you match it to the correct output. So 8 ohm tap into an 8 ohm speaker, same for 16. Some people will say that an amp sounds slightly different running at 16 ohms over 8 because you're using more winds of the output transformer, but for all intents and purposes for this debate, it doesn't make any difference. You just have to match the impedances. Now, it gets a lot more interesting when you're pairing speakers in a cabinet. And it all boils down to how you're connecting the speakers to each other. So let's take the example of a 2x12 cabinet with two 8 ohm speakers in it. You can wire those together in two different ways, series and parallel. Now, series essentially means you take the positive wire coming from the jack at the back of the cabinet, connect it to the positive tab of the first speaker. You then take the negative tab of that speaker and connect it over to the positive of the second speaker, and the negative tab from there you wire to the negative lead going back to the jack. So you create a series route through the two speakers. And when you're doing that, essentially you take the impedances of the speakers you're using and add them together. So two 8 ohm speakers, 8 plus 8 gives you a 16 ohm load. But you can also wire two speakers together in parallel, which essentially means you take the positive and negative leads coming from the jack of the cabinet and connect them both to the first speaker, and then use two jumper cables to patch the positive terminal of the first speaker over to the positive terminal of the second, and the same for the negative. So you're essentially splitting the signal before it goes through the coil, and you're sharing the load equally before it drives the speakers. So that's called parallel wiring. And when you're doing that, you never want to mix impedances of speakers within the same cabinet. So use only 8 ohm speakers or only 16 ohm speakers within a cabinet, otherwise you create weird loads that can damage amplifiers. But if you have two 8 ohm speakers wired in parallel, you essentially take the impedance of the speakers you're using, 8, and divide it by the number of speakers you're using, 2. So 8 divided by 2 gives you a 4 ohm load, wiring two 8 ohm speakers together in parallel. If you have two 16 ohm speakers in parallel, that gives you an 8 ohm load. So you then need to match the output of your amp with the correct ohm load or the impedance of the cabinet you've wired together. So not all amps have a 4 ohm load. My two Dr. Z's do, but none of my other amps do. So people are generally looking at 8 or 16. So it just depends on the impedances of the speakers you're using and how you're wiring them together. But that's essentially the maths. It's something that a lot of people find quite confusing. I certainly did for a lot of years. That video coming soon will cover it in a lot more detail. But that's a great question, Yusuf. Thank you. G. Marion. Thanks for addressing my chorus inquiry. Don't remember what that was. Hopefully I gave a decent answer. I hope I don't ask Perky too many questions, no such thing, but I'm curious to know if there are any English-made models of guitar on your wish list, perhaps a vintage Vox or something else. I see you support British pedal and amp makers, but I can't recall any British guitars in your collection. And you're absolutely right, and it's really strange that here in the UK we don't seem to have too many guitar companies. I can think of Gordon Smith, Crimson, I think the Sims Custom Shop over in Kent or Essex. But aside from that, we're pretty much looking at like one-off independent luthiers to do custom builds, which cost thousands and thousands of pounds. We don't really have a British equivalent of Gibson or Fender. We used to have Burns. I don't know if Burns are still made in the UK or not. And you say vintage Vox guitars. But that's about it. So I would love to add a British-made guitar to my collection. So if you have any suggestions of companies to look at for vintage spec and style guitars made here in the UK, drop them in the comments. I'd love to have a look. But yeah, absolutely, I don't own really any British-made guitars, and I would absolutely love to. So yeah, suggestions in the comments, please. RTO, great stuff. Joe, I'm curious. Have you spoken much before about what inspired your move towards vintage spec parts in your guitars? Probably not on camera, but I think it's probably just a journey that guitarists go on as they mature as players and learn more about their preferences. So back when I was starting out, when I was 12 or 13, I didn't really care what I played. I had an Epiphone Les Paul going into any amp with any overdrive pedal, all gains on full, and I would play anything through it. But then I started to realise that the guitar sounds I liked, even though I wasn't necessarily aware of that at the time, were old school guitar sounds, Strats, Tellys, 335s, SGs, Les Pauls, into Marshall amps and Vox amps and things like that. So I was leaning towards that vintage sound, even though I wasn't necessarily aware of it in the early days. But then as you mature as a player, it depends what sort of player you are. If you are just a guitarist and you'll play any guitar into any amp and you just want to make noise, fantastic, that's a great approach. But if you're really into your tone and you're always sort of chasing a sound in your head, there are infinite rabbit holes you can go down, infinitely deep. And the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, you tend to find diminishing returns at the bottom. So all of a sudden you can go from, I'm not sure if I like single coils or humbuckers, into what's the carbon content of my pole screws in my PAF replica, because I'm not sure if that's vintage correct or not. And you can go even deeper than that too. So I think that's just it. I was always into vintage guitar sounds, even though I didn't know it. But then as I've matured as a player and begun to become a sort of tone chaser, you start to look much deeper into the sounds that you love and how they were recorded and all that sort of stuff. And you just go on a sort of a quest of your own personal taste, which is pretty much a never-ending quest. You can carry on until you die, you know, you can just carry on down all those rabbit holes. I love tone chasing, I think it's great, but a lot of people don't, and that's absolutely fine. You just want to pick up a guitar and play, that's great too. But that's why I tend to lean towards vintage style parts in my guitars, just because it gets me 1% closer to the sound I have in my head, which is usually a Gibson guitar through a Marshall amp or something like that, recorded back in the 60s or 70s. So it's just that tone chasing journey. Sam Halperin, what's your tracking setup with respect to monitoring and low latency / playability? When I'm making demo videos, there is no monitoring. I just have a guitar amp in the room turned up really, really loud. So when you see me on camera playing a guitar, I generally have like a Celestion Gold punching me in the face from just off camera. So I don't use any monitoring, I just have an amp in a room turned up. When I'm recording, like multi-track recording and layering songs up, I have an Apogee interface. I can't remember the exact model, Integral something or other. I'll put the model on screen in the post edit, and just a set of headphones, and I set the settings of Pro Tools for as low latency as I can get away with. But for demo videos, I don't have any monitoring at all. Latency is never an issue. I can set Pro Tools so it's running very stably, and it doesn't matter if that has, you know, lots of delay on the conversion, because I just chop the audio up in the post edit anyway. So it's kind of an irrelevant concept. I just have a guitar amp punching me in the face doing these videos. If you want to hear more about how I make videos and how I record the amps and balance the audio out, let me know in the comments. I've been thinking about making a video like that, but I just don't know if there'd be enough interest there. But if you would be interested, let me know, and if there's, you know, enough of you that want to see that, I'll make that video for sure. 3-card Monty. That's what a real PAF sounds like. Yep. Now this is kind of one of the biggest rabbit holes I've been down, which is PAF pickups. And I've recently got a hold of these throwback SLE 101s and put them in this Les Paul Standard. They are absolutely wonderful things. And yeah, it does make this guitar sound, you know, not exactly, but a lot closer to those old burst Les Pauls. They really are special pickups. They're not, you know, necessarily the best PAFs out there. It's all personal preference. And of course, the price of these throwbacks puts off 99% of potential customers. But if you can get your hands on a set affordably, they are definitely worth checking out. And as you heard in that demo video, into a non-master volume tube amp, cranked up, riding the volumes, they are absolutely glorious. You've got a few more questions about these pickups here, I think. Kurt Anland, would be very interesting to see these compared with the Montys. Now, I have shot that video already. Will probably be out in September time. I have these in the Les Paul, and then I swapped them out for the Monties with the same setup. And I did the same thing with my Heritage 535, which has the Monties in, and I swapped them out for the throwbacks, matching that setup as well. So I'm kind of doing these two pickups compared in two different guitars. Slight spoiler alert, they're very, very close. We're talking subtle differences at best, but both amazing sets of pickups, but these throwbacks really are great. Thomas Koch would be super nice if you could compare them to the Stevens design. I did drop Dave Stevens a few emails. I do like his YouTube channel. His the vintage Les Paul isn't or something, talking about the hardware on modern Les Pauls and what you can buy to get them closer to the old bursts. I did drop him an email, but to be honest, the wait time was a bit ambiguous. It was 18 months, maybe more, and you also had to pay up front for them, which made me feel a little bit uneasy. I think they're like $650 for a set, so to pay $650 with no real indication of when they might turn up, when you can pay a little bit less for the throwbacks and get them the week after, I'm sure they are slightly different, but they're both chasing after the 100% vintage accuracy thing. So I'm just going to go with the people who do amazing work and can deliver in a sensible time frame, rather than pay now and receive maybe at some point in the future, possibly. It's made me feel a bit uneasy, but I'm sure Dave's pickups are amazing. I would love to try a set and compare them to throwbacks, but with that purchasing setup, probably not. Lane Tacker, what do you have the pickup height set to on these? I just got to set them and trying to find a good height. I measured these and they are actually quite low down. I think from the bottom of the low E string, like the bottom of the wind on the string, to the top of the pickup cover is about 6mm on the bridge pickup and 7 on the neck. So I have mine set quite low down, but it's all personal preference. You might want them close to the strings for a bit more higher output and a bit more bite, lower them down for a more sort of mellow woody sound, and it's all completely dependent on your preferences and the guitar you're putting them in. So there's no right or wrong when it comes to how you have your pickup heights set, but that's how I have them set. I generally have PAF pickups set pretty low down and a bit lower than most people probably would, but that's just my preference. The 92 Project, short review of 24 minutes, and this was the Origin Effects Revival Drive. Believe it or not, 24 minutes was a short review of that pedal. If you look at other videos that people have done of that pedal, they can run into 60, 90 minutes or more. There are so many features in that pedal. If you try and cover them all, you are making a Hollywood blockbuster pretty much. So just going through the preset sounds in that pedal and having it as only 24 minutes, that was a short review in the grand scheme of Revival Drive reviews, surprisingly. Robbie Green, nice one Joe, I love mine, most convincing overdrive pedal I've ever tried by a mile. Magma 57 is on the bucket list, Simon is a genius. Recently got myself a Magma 57. To be honest, I've sold the Revival Drive and replaced it with a Magma 57. This thing is incredible. I haven't demoed this yet, but I will do soon. It's a wonderful sounding pedal. It has the kind of magnatone breakup, which I think is fairly similar to like an old Tweed amp. And of course you have the vibrato in there too. It's just a wonderful sounding thing. And so I've been really enjoying getting to know this pedal, so can't wait to shoot the demo video of that. David Sanderson, hi Joe, I bought a CE3 thanks to your recent video, fantastic, and I love the vibrato setting. I made myself a Magma Vibe clone pedal and I really like the sound of it, but it's different from the CE3 vibrato. Less extreme and has a particular warble. How does the VB2 compare to the CE3 vibrato? Now, I've got my VB2 here, and I've also just sold the CE3 actually, for no reason aside from the fact that I just wanted to let it go to someone who's going to use it more than I would. I'm a pedal collector, but I want to get a lot of use out of the pedals I collect, and I thought, would I ever use the CE3 over the CE2? Probably not. I love the stereo mode, but would I ever use it over the Dimension C? Probably not. I love the vibrato mode. Would I ever use it over this? Probably not. So it didn't seem much point hanging on to it. Now, before I sold the CE3, I was going to put that video together comparing the vibrato setting on the CE3 to the VB2. But I went to shoot the video and this is actually packed up. So it's going to have to go on a bit of a holiday to see Nick Williams and get fixed. I think it's just a slight power issue or something, because you put a battery in and the light does light up briefly, then goes out. So I don't quite know what's wrong with it, but I was going to put that video together for you, David, but I couldn't because it's bust. So hopefully, from memory and just my instinct would say the VB2 is slightly more inspiring sounding, slightly smoother waveform, but the CE3 had a great vibrato setting. It was quite extreme. You used to have to keep it quite low down on all the settings. But, you know, if you don't want to pay for an original VB2 because they go for crazy money, a CE3 vibrato will be absolutely fine. Enrico Palazzo, really curious about this one. I'm probably going to get it to boost my Sir Ombre. And this is the Kingsley Jester. Now, I've received this pedal a couple of weeks ago, and much like my reaction to the Page when I bought that very end of 2020, I plugged the Page in, and within 5 seconds of playing it, it became one of my favourite overdrives. It was just absolutely dialed into perfection in terms of its design. Exactly the same story with this. And it's a pain because you've got to wait 6-7 months for Simon's pedals, and I've got to import them from Canada. They are quite pricey, but they are just amazing. And I can't wait to demo this like the Magma, because it is just astonishing. This is actually kind of like a halfway house between a standard Jester and the Jester Custom, I think, because it doesn't have any of the custom features aside from this extra knob on the top, which is the sizzle knob. So this is called the Jester Sizzle, technically. And that just adds a little bit of kind of presency high end in. And it's really, really nice. If you have it all the way down, this is just a standard Jester. But I would never run it above probably 12 o'clock, but just being able to add a little bit more clarity and snap in is amazing. So I'm blown away by this pedal, and you'll probably see that in whatever video I come up with demoing it, but astonishing sounding thing. Jeremy James was getting ready to order the Faber stuff, but I preferred Gibson on every single clip. Thanks for saving me some cash, Joe. You're very welcome, and that's what these sorts of comparison videos are all about. Now, in that video, personally, I preferred the Faber hardware, but you preferred the Gibson, and that's great. If it saves you money rather than costing you money, that's brilliant too. Again, it's all rabbit holes, it's all personal preference as to which you prefer, and it works best for you. So, as I said, that's what these videos are all about. It's kind of dispelling myths as much as it is indulging comparisons and things like that. So, yeah, it's great that I've saved you some money there. But, yeah, both the Gibson and the Faber hardware are both amazing. They're just slightly different from each other. The 92 Project. Joe, how come I never saw you play a Vibe pedal? I'm just not really that into them, to be honest. You know, I love kind of old school modulation effects, but I'm much more of a sort of classic phaser guy than I am a Uni Vibe. The Magma 57 has that 0% or 0 degree blend mode, which is pretty close to a Uni Vibe-type sound. My Screddy Little Miss Sunshine phaser uses photocells, so it has a little bit of that Vibe-type thing about it, especially at higher speed settings. I've never liked the throb of a Vibe. I'd much rather use a phaser for that kind of smooth modulation rather than that wub 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 thing that goes on. I hear it, and it's never a sound that works for me. People get amazing sounds out of it. For some people, it's their whole thing. But for me, give me a phaser. I'd rather stick with that. But that's just my personal preference again. And finally, Daniel Duran. Joe, I love your videos, but that intro music is cancer. Brutal. Skip it. Is my simple answer to that. Some people love the intro music, other people really hate it. If you're someone who hates it, when you see one of my videos and click on it, just drag it 20 seconds in and everybody's happy. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. Simple as that. But glad you love the videos nonetheless. So there we are, folks. Slightly shorter video this month, but some really great questions there. So thank you ever so much for watching, folks. Any questions for next month? Drop them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them, and comment under any videos in the next month that appear. I collate them all at the end of the month and make these videos. So I love doing these videos, and I know some people aren't too fond of them, but some people really like watching them as well. So take from it what you will. So thanks ever so much, folks, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.